Okay, hey team. This week I had other topics probably to talk about. Nothing fully formed, but I was listening to I think it was Sigma Nutrition and Jacob Skepis on Revive Stronger, and I was sort of ruminating on some thoughts about like diet periodization and sustainability and how diet periodization. Oh, and sorry, also in this milieu, I've had a lot of like lay people and not lay people talking about the sustainability of diet culture and how attainable or possible it is or isn't long term. And I've been thinking about where I stand on this because I consider myself a socially progressive person. I want to be inclusive. I want to be accepting of all viewpoints and I was going to say philosophies, but I want to be open to philosophies that maybe I can find nuanced positions in. And I don't want to outright dismiss the anti-diet culture people because I think they have a criticism that needs to be addressed and listened to, and perhaps incorporated into whatever philosophies I or you might have. So, in thinking about being a proponent of diets, and we can maybe have a discussion about what we mean by diet, whether we mean something as fundamental as just any eating habits that are in any way monitored or based on previous history of monitoring or something like that. Because I feel like intuitive eating, as it's used now, still it comes from a place of people who understand what calories and macros and all those kind of things are, and I don't feel like that's necessarily featured in the sort of anti-diet conversations, but I profess to be pretty ignorant and also open to changing my mind, so I'm happy to have my views discussed and to discuss them. But in taking the position of being, I guess you could say, pro-dietary assistance changes, usages for now, how do we make them sustainable and how do we make them achievable? So sustainability is thrown around a lot, and I feel like diet periodization addresses it and largely solves it. Now, it doesn't, I was going to say it doesn't necessarily work for all people, but I think that, well, I don't have the data to say that it does or doesn't. I mean, let's not get too sidetracked. I wanted to talk about how diet periodization makes controlling body weight sustainable. So, I was listening to Sigma Nutrition, I think it was Sigma Nutrition's latest podcast, and I forget who he had on there. The person who he had on there was talking about sustainability. Sorry, it was Greg Slater talking about dietary fatigue, nutrition periodization, and dietary adherence model. And something he said which made me want to talk about sustainability was the idea that diet periodization means that sustainability isn't always the goal, but it is the overarching goal, but not always the plan. So maybe we should define what diet periodization is. So diet periodization is, maybe I'm not the best person to define it, but the way I use it, or the way I see it, is periods of calorie maintenance, and this is just in any order, periods of calorie maintenance, periods of calorie deficits, periods of calorie surplus. And those are determined by the goals, desires, health status, anthropometry of the client. So if somebody comes to you and is looking to lose weight, you might start them on, say, something like a maintenance period to get a sense for where their eating habits are, where the metabolism is in terms of NEAT being down-regulated. Have they been under-eating for a long time? Have they been overeating? Do they lose or gain weight when you put them on their maintenance calories? Those kind of things. And then you can move them into periods of unsustainable, potentially, weight loss, or sustainable weight loss. So you could do moderate calorie deficits at 10 to 5 to 10%, and then maybe bigger ones at 15 to 20% of total calories. And we'll get into that in a minute because that refers to sustainability. But what we would do then is roughly have that go for a period of time until they lose a couple of kilos, and then do a periodization, a period of, say, maintenance level calories, their new maintenance, to set a new set point for their body weight. But I'll get into that in a little bit. So what I mean by sustainability, going back to my original point, was sustainability doesn't always mean that everything you do has to be 100% sustainable all the time. Let's say we have that person who's just done their maintenance phase and they're going into like not a digging phase, but like a calorie deficit. Now, if you put them on a 20% calorie deficit, that might not be sustainable, but a short period at that might be something that they can tolerate and then come out of and go back to maintenance and then sustain that new calorie target. And then from there you might go so what I'm saying is that is how you filter in unsustainable practices into a sustainable diet. So we get caught up in this idea that diets need to be something that you have to do, one thing that you can do forever. But I think diet periodization sort of has the trick or the tip to get us into unsustainable and thus plateau breaking calorie deficits, but for short periods of time, which then we can move up to periods of calorie maintenance. So going back to diet periodization and talking about, say, putting someone at maintenance level calories, getting somebody into a small deficit, getting them into a larger deficit, bringing them to maintenance when they've lost, say, 3 to 5 kilos, get them there for 1, 2, 3 months, let them settle at that new weight, let them eat maintenance, track their weight, and then maybe have another period of going. I mean, it depends on the person, right? If somebody comes to you and wants to lose 20 kilos and you assess that it's safe to do that, this may take a period of 6 to 12 months. And I think that's what sort of can be troubling for some people who are really unhappy with their bodies. And this is where coaching them to to focus on strength training and building muscle mass and, loving the body they're in and all those kind of things can really help. How far are we in? So, I mean, that's really, I'm not obviously digging into this issue really at all, but for my clients and others who are sort of looking at fat loss and who maybe have a few extra pounds and they're wondering how they're going to get it all off and they wonder how they can maintain a big calorie deficit, some clients I've started introducing this periodization concept to, and it's been working pretty well in the sense that when you say to a client, I want you to go at a 500 or 600 calorie deficit, but for 4 weeks only, and then we're going to take you back to maintenance, that becomes a much easier proposition than going, you have 20 kilos to lose, we're just going to starve you until you get there. Because I've seen that, I've done that, and you get and then a bounce back. And that's where the sort of diet culture, the anti-diet culture people are sort of, I think that's mostly what they're referring to. They're referring to people who just starve themselves for 6 months, are miserable, lose a bunch of weight, and then go straight back to how they're eating before. And that's where you start to get into the diet periodization of deficits and maintenance and maybe growth, which we can talk about in a second, allow you to coach that person through new eating habits, whether it's decreasing hyperpalatable foods, increasing protein intake. And that was another thing that that gentleman whose name I've already forgotten, Greg Slater, referred to, I believe, actually. Sorry, it might not have been him. I have terrible memory. But it was the idea of increasing protein to increase satiety. Actually, no, it was the 3DMJ crew. It was the 3DMJ crew in their latest podcast about diet recovery. So doing things like increasing protein right up there to help satiety and to help you feel full, and to decrease feelings of wanting to overeat, which can be all part of the re-education process, because most people don't typically eat a lot of protein. They eat a lot of fat, they eat a lot of carbs. So yeah, just a short one today to talk about, like, if you're struggling to lose weight and you feel like you're just yo-yoing all the time, find a fitness professional that can start to introduce these periods of low. Maybe like you're just burnt out. And I know that's in that initial conversation about your goals. Telling somebody that they may need to sit at maintenance for a little while is a tricky conversation to have, but I do think it's a worthwhile conversation to have, because you need to get a sense for where they are with food, get a sense for where their metabolism is at, and get a sense for like where you can even go. So yeah, I've got eggs on the stove and they are spewing water all over the place. That's why I keep getting distracted. So yeah, find somebody who can plan a series of phases around holidays, around competitions you might have, around holidays or something you might have, where you can go through those periods. And just finally, I'll talk about going through periods of increased calorie surplus too, and thinking about how we want to set new norms by going into maintenance level phases, but also going into a slight surplus every now and then, so we can have the calories to build new muscle tissue and increase our performance, and also just have those feelings of being satiated, because as we know, when somebody's in a calorie deficit for quite long periods of time, their hunger and satiety signals can get messed up, and they get to a place where they're just ravenously hungry all the time. And a maintenance phase may not necessarily cut it. It may, certainly if it's long enough. But adding, again, like short periods of mild calorie surpluses to longer periods, depending on like the physique goals of the person, could be something that help with increasing satiety, working with new body fat levels and all this kind of stuff, and increasing performance. I realized I didn't talk about my fat loss this week. So I got sick on Sunday/Monday. So I was going to peak with this week and deload next week. But I've decided to basically run the deload this week and the refeed. So I've only trained Tuesday. I've been doing some steps. Like I did 1 or 2 treadmill sessions just to get my steps up. But I've basically brought my calories up to about 2.4, 2.5. I had a day in there that was like 3.7, and I've had days that have been around 2.2. So my average for the week is sitting at about 2.4. I only went in on Tuesday and did some AMRAP testing, so as many reps as possible for those not in the know. So I did some AMRAP testing for my pushes, so my percentage lifts for push, so close grip bench, overhead press, and bench press, and I did some rear delt stuff. I've been meaning to get in and do some AMRAPs for back and legs, but I've just been really tired, and I've been recovering and dehydrated and cutting myself some slack, so I've been eating. And I'll go in tomorrow and I'll do an AMRAP for squat, deadlift, maybe front squat and Romanian. And then maybe I'll do some, like 2 sets of leg extension hip thrusts to maintain some glutes. And then I'll design my new program. I'm designing it currently, and I'm looking at probably 4 full body days. But I might bring the sets down. I'm going to bring the calories up in the lead to Bali. Because I was averaging with my steps about 2,000 calories a day, I'm probably going to bring it up to, with steps, probably around 2.2 for the remainder, for all the next, because I've got 5 weeks till I go. So for the next probably 3 weeks, I'll leave it at 2. And then for the last 2 weeks before I go, I'm going to really just drop the calories down and go for like a little mini cut inside a deficit. So really sort of like a 2-week digging phase, I guess you could say. But yeah, I've been taking some selfies, and body looks like it's really responded to the deload and refeed, looking leaner, feeling fuller, feeling so much better just having some friggin' carbs. Shout out to Jamie for cooking me steak, potatoes and halloumi a couple of times this week, and I've come home from like 15-hour days just shattered and despondent. So world's best girlfriend. I think that's roughly it. I understand I haven't dug very deep into the sustainability ideas and diet periodization ideas, but I did want to just touch on it as a concept that maybe you can inquire with me or your local fitness professional about further, and just be like, why are we not doing this? Reasons for and against. I understand touching on diet culture and anti-diet culture is potentially going to open a can of worms. I don't know how many people are seeing this. Like I said, happy to be educated, happy to learn more and have a discussion and see where our views land after. So thanks everybody for watching, and sorry if I missed anything. Like and subscribe, I guess, and yeah, comment if you have any other further questions. Thanks a lot.